repeat it again. And it is 6 o'clock now, so I will pin myself. Hello, I can see all your faces, but I'm not going to be able to see them anymore. Welcome, everybody. I am pleased to announce that I am doing significantly better than I was this time last week when I was accidentally leading the class that I wasn't expecting to post-festival. So you've got me back on form, which is good. We are going to do the first of 3 deep squat classes today. And don't worry, I've said this before, don't worry, we're not actually doing that much squatting. So if you've got creaky knees and things like that, this is still going to be suitable for you to do. As ever, if anything causes you aggravated levels of pain and tension, don't do the exercise, but we won't actually be doing that much squatting itself, just a test at the beginning and a test at the end. In terms of equipment today, you are going to need a sliver of wall, not for wall drop, for flexion abdominals position. You're going to need a step. So the bottom of a staircase can work well, but you're going to need something to put your hands on to kind of support you. So like I'm using my my banister here, and I'm using my windowsill. If you can't set that up at home, then I want you to try and get yourself set up with a wall drop setup. So if you've got a wooden slant board, you've got what you need, and you can make a DIY version of this with a couple of yoga blocks and a wooden chopping board. And if you can't get that set up today, don't worry, I'll just have you stand up with your back against the wall, feet flat to the floor, and you can try one of the alternatives another time. You're going to need your yoga strap, not a resistance band today. You're actually going to need a yoga strap for what we're using it for, and a yoga block, which can also be a cushion, but I would also advise having a cushion or 2 to hand as well for the exercises. And I'm not going to talk too much about squats today, just because I want to get the class going. And I'm giving you quite a lot of like follow-up information about squats over the next couple of weeks in your members email. But what I will say is, it's something that you might find quite handy is to film yourself at the beginning of this month, and maybe every week film yourself just to see a little bit of a progress update on how your squat is doing. And then hopefully at the end of the month, you're going to notice that you're moving quite differently as you do your deep squat. So we are going to start off today by doing our function test. And our function test today is not going to be our normal standing position. It's going to be a squat position. If you are somebody who knows that going this low to the ground is going to cause you pain, then you can absolutely use a chair instead. So you can practice kind of lowering yourself down into your chair and sitting up, and then standing back up again like that. So if going down into a squat position feels just completely inaccessible for you, what I want you to do instead is practice having your feet parallel. So I don't want those toes turning out to the side, and I don't want your feet wider than your hips, because that makes squatting a lot easier. I want your feet, ankles, knees, and hips parallel with one another. And if the first version of what you can test yourself with today is just slowly, with control, you're kind of imagining that you're going into that squat, but you're landing yourself in your chair instead of going down to the floor. Or if you want to try the kind of full version of the squat, your alternative, and we're going to do this at the end of class again today as well, parallel feet, hip width apart. So toes not turning out, feet aren't wide. That makes squats a lot easier. And let's just see how we go. So trying not to adjust your toe position at all. Take yourself down nice and slowly, and just judge how far you can get to and how comfortable it feels. So I don't feel very strong in this at all today. My toes are clawing. My toes are wanting to lift up. My upper body is having to kind of curve quite far forwards to counterbalance me here. I don't feel very strong in my ankles and my hips, but hopefully at the end of class, I'm going to feel a bit different. You might be much, much, much higher, and that's absolutely fine. You're gauging this off what your body can do, not what my body can do. So just see if you feel better or worse, or a change of mobility at the end of the class, but also importantly at the end of the month, because the whole of the program that you're doing this month is going to be moving you on this journey towards your squat. Okay. just going to move my little collection of things that I don't need out of the way. We are starting off, for those in the know, with Flexion Abdominals Position at the wall. So for Flexion Abdominals Position, you're going to need a cushion or two maybe, and you're going to need your yoga block like this. And the reason that we're doing Flexion Abdominals Position is because it is an upside down squat. So it's a great place to start. Your body is not having to deal with all of your various joints. It's not having to deal with gravity in the same way. So it's a really kind of accessible position for most people to get themselves set up with all of their body parts doing the things that they need to do for a squat, but you're just doing it on your back rather than doing it on your feet. So when we're in Flexion Abdominals Position, and especially bearing in mind the kind of intention of this month, we need to make sure that we're in a decent amount of hip flexion. So when your knees are bent towards your body like this, you are in hip flexion, and the strength of your hip flexors is really important when it comes to squatting. So the closer you are to the wall, the more hip flexion you are asking of your body, therefore the more difficult it will be. But what is really important as you do this is you don't go so close to the wall that your pelvis tucks under and your coccyx, your tailbone, lifts up off the floor. So you're finding a sweet spot where you can feel your tailbone on the floor. Hopefully you can see the difference there in the camera. My spine is straight. My pelvis is actually in a little bit of extension. So it's like my tailbone is grounded, but my sacrum, my lower back is slightly lifted off. I'm not doing this. I'm not tucking my pelvis under and lifting my bum up. Because if my bum is hovering off the floor, I'm not in hip flexion, I'm in lumbar flexion, and my abs are kind of like gripping. What I want is for the angle of your body to be very sharply at the hip. I want your hips to be really burning when we start doing what we're about to do next. It's also important that the feet stay, the shins stay parallel with the ground. So don't have your feet too far up. We want those knees to be quite bent, and we also want our ankles to be in dorsiflexion, which is the position that they're in right now. In order to be in dorsiflexion, we've got to make sure that our toes are not pointing out to the side. So if the toes are pointing out to the side, wider than your ankles, you are externally rotating your feet, which is cheating. So dorsiflexion is normally one of the hardest movements for kind of dysfunctional feet to do. We've got to make sure that we're encouraging that toes, ankles, knees, and hips position, just like we did when we were standing up, but when we're at the wall like this. Have a cushion here if you need to. So I want the bottom of your rib cage to feel grounded on the floor. I don't want it to be that your rib cage is flaring up like this. We're going to put the yoga block in between our knees. Depending on the size of your yoga block will depend on which way round you have it, but you want to be squeezing into the block with your knees whilst keeping your knees at hip width distance apart. So for me, that means the medium way around rather than the narrow way and rather than the wide way. And we're just going to, I say just, this can be very hard work. We're going to squeeze this block. So you are holding a continuous squeeze with this yoga block and your knees. And I'll just let things kind of kick into gear a second before I start giving you further cues. But you are maintaining a consistent squeeze with the yoga block. So we're not squeezing, holding, releasing. We are actually going to do that next. But for now, we're just squeezing on the block. We're trying to apply equal pressure from side to side. You might notice that you've got like one leg that feels more dominant than the other. We're making sure that our big toe joints stay against the wall. For some of you, you're going to notice that you're kind of scooping your big toe joints away from the wall. And we really want to actually like pin into the wall with our big toe joints, but we're not using our feet to push our bodies away. So sometimes people will use their feet to kind of push their bodies away from the wall. Most of your feet are staying quite relaxed in position here, but I do want your big toes pinned in because it helps you with that inner hip connection that we really need for this deep squat position. You can put your hands behind your head here. So if it feels nice to interlink your fingers and put your hands behind your head, what this can also do is really help lengthen your thoracic spine, your mid-back. It can open up the shoulders. It can reposition the shoulders and open up the chest. So it turns it into more of a whole body exercise. But I don't want you doing this with your arms. If it results in that rib cage tilting up away from the floor, you might be better off having your elbows not quite so open if you're doing that. The rib cage is more of a priority than how open your elbows are. And what is important in this position, especially with what we're trying to do at the moment with our squat, is I want you to try and keep your rib cage grounded, but to try and roll your pelvis further forwards as if you're creating an arch in your lower back. So there is a difference between lifting the rib cage, which is not what we want, versus moving the pelvis further forward. So rolling the pelvis so that you put more weight into your coccyx, your tailbone. You're not actually going to create an arch in your lower back, but it's as if you were to be moving in that direction, but not from the rib cage. That movement forward where it feels like the cogs are kind of tightening in the hip joint as the pelvis moves forward into extension or an anterior position is the position of a super engaged pelvis and also a balanced pelvis. So this is going to really help us with strengthening the muscles that need to support us in our general daily lives for sure, but also definitely as we do our deep squat. I'll give us another just 10 seconds here. Keep squeezing. We are going to stay in this position though, and we're going to do 2 minutes of just squeezing, holding, and releasing the block. 3, 2, 1, off you go. So you're squeezing, holding, releasing. Squeezing, holding, releasing. As you do this squeezing, holding, releasing motion with your knees, I need you to remember your breath. So you are keeping your mouth closed if you can, breathing in through your nose, relaxing your jaw, you're relaxing your hands, you're relaxing your belly, and you're sending your breath into the bottom of your rib cage, the sides of your rib cage, and the back of your rib cage. The belly is relaxed. The pelvis tries to roll forwards, which doesn't mean tucking up and under posteriorly. Rolling the pelvis forwards is like you're imagining that you're trying to arch your back. You're not using your rib cage to create that motion. You're using the strength of your hips. And you might not have the strength of your hips at the moment to do that, but this exercise, I promise you, will take you in that direction. Keep the shins parallel to the floor. Keep toes, ankles, knees, and hips in alignment with one another. The big toe joints stay against the wall, but we're not using the feet to kind of push against the wall. Keep trying to squeeze the block with your knees, and that's going to wake up your inner thighs, your adductors, but also your hip flexors and also actually your lateral hip muscles, which are involved in internal hip rotation. But as you do that squeeze in with the block, I don't want the pelvis shunting under posteriorly because that's going to undo the hard work that we're doing for this kind of situation. Try and roll the pelvis forwards while squeezing your knees in. It's going to feel like a bit of a fight between the hips and the pelvis, but it's going to be really firing up the muscles that we need in order to support you in your squat. And that is time. So relax off. Bring yourself away from the wall. And we are going to come into supine calf and hamstring stretch. So this is where you're going to need your yoga strap. 1 second, let me just reposition myself. And this is where, yeah, you'll want a yoga strap rather than a resistance band here, because you want something quite firm rather than anything that's going to move against what we're doing. You can have your head on a pillow if you prefer. So we're going to come to our hook lying position, like so. And you're going to start off with your strap underneath the ball of your left foot. You're going to have your right foot in alignment with the hip. So the principle stays the same as what we've just done at the wall. Make sure that that right toe isn't wider than the right ankle. Make sure your right knee isn't flopping out or flopping in. We're trying to keep that right leg as a rudder. It's keeping you firm and steady here. You've got your left knee in alignment with your right knee, so you're not taking it too high. Your hands are on your strap, but you're trying to keep as much of your upper back and mid back and lower back grounded on the floor as possible. So I don't want you really flaring that rib cage or pulling so hard with your hands on the strap that you're curving your upper back. We want the spine long and flat. We want the hands to be holding your foot, but not really doing anything. So if I let go of my strap here, my leg isn't moving out of position. It's still staying exactly where it is. The hands are for support. They're not holding your leg up. You are going to keep that femur, that thigh bone on that left leg level with your right leg. You're going to put a little bit of a bend into the left knee to stop you from cheating and hyperextending your knee. You're going to flex your left foot back towards you in dorsiflexion. And then you're going to squeeze your quad using your brain. Your quad is your front thigh muscle. And you're going to, at the same time as you squeeze your quad, make sure that you keep pulling your foot back towards you using the front of your shin. So what can happen here is if people are not very flexible in their ankles, as they straighten their knee, they start pushing their foot away. We don't want that. We've got to prioritize the dorsiflexion of the foot here, even if that means that your knee is slightly bent. I'd rather your knee be bent than you not be dorsiflexing. We're going to do a minute here. We just hold. So we're really trying to drive our ankle away from our body. We're keeping our breathing calm and steady. The upper body is still, in and out of the nose and into the diaphragm. Our right leg, even though it's bent, is still doing something, so keep it in alignment with the hip. We want the shin on fire. The calf will be stretching here, and squeezing the quad may also be giving you some wobbles. You want the middle of your second and your third toe in alignment with your hip joints. Don't worry where your left knee goes. So as you look down your leg, you might panic that your left kneecap is like rolling inwards. Don't worry about that. Focus on the foot. And the more that you focus on the foot, the more the kneecap will over time start to straighten itself out. Keep the belly soft, keep breathing, and that's a minute. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to keep our foot where it is. Sorry, we're going to keep our strap where it is. We're going to take the leg higher, but we're not going higher than our tailbone wants us to. So if the tailbone tucks up and lifts under and off the ground, like I said in that last exercise, you've gone too far. This is not going to stretch your hamstring. Keep the tailbone grounded. That's going to keep you in hip flexion, and that's where you're going to get a stretch through your hamstring. Once again, especially if you are prone to hyperextension, it's probably going to be helpful to give yourself a little bit of a bend in the knee. Focus on the dorsiflexion of the foot, so the pulling backwards of the foot using the front of the shin. Really focus on driving that ankle away from your body, not straightening the knee. Squeeze your quad using your brain, and then off we go. We're trying to find a position where we feel stuff going on through that left leg. Keep the second and the third toe of the left foot in alignment with the hip. And when you look at your toes, you don't want your big toes closer to you than your fifth toes. If your big toes are closer to you than your fifth toes, you are supinating your foot. you're not dorsiflexing your foot. So dysfunctional feet and ankles have lots of ways that they will try and cheat. And when you learn about them, it's your job to try and stop your body from doing that. Even if it means that your leg is much more bent or much lower, you're doing it better. You're going to change that dorsiflexion of the foot. And dorsiflexion of the foot is a super important component of squatting well. We've got 10 seconds left here. Relax your jaw, relax your hands. It's your legs that are working hard, nothing else at all. And time. Exactly the same thing on the right leg. So I'm putting my strap underneath the ball of my right foot, my left toes, ankles, knees, and hip in alignment. I'm driving that right foot away. My right knee stays level with my left knee. I'm going to keep a little bit of a bend in my knee to begin. I'm focusing on pulling the foot back, not with the strap, but with the muscles along the front of my shin. And then what I'm going to do is use my brain. I'm engaging my quad. I'm going to straighten my knee a little bit, but not at the compromise of what my foot is doing. And off we go. I relax my jaw. I relax my belly. I relax my breathing. I keep flexing that foot back towards me. My pelvis is still on the floor on both sides. Some of you might start rotating your pelvis to try and cheat. We don't want that pelvis rotating. We want the pelvis flat to the floor. We want the spine as long and as comfortable as possible. No hunching through the upper body, no arching through the rib cage. We are just working our lower legs and our hips here. Remember the big toes. So compensating feet are going to try and pull the big toe closer to you than the fifth toe. You've got to make sure that you're angling your foot so that your fifth toe is as close back towards you as your big toe is. Keep squeezing that quad. We're not buckling back at the knee. Our focus is here primarily on our feet. And that's time. And that one, same thing goes. We're going to take the leg up. Our focus is not on straightening the knee, because if we straighten the knee, we're going to be more likely to hyperextend, nor is it on how far back we take the leg, because then we'll be more likely to compensate through our pelvis. Pelvis stays firm, knee slightly bent, and just drive the ankle away and find whatever works for you. And if your leg is wobbling all over the place, if you're getting a huge burn, big stretch down the backs of your legs, then that's great. You're finding your edge. So you're finding a position that you can do this in where you're maintaining your breath. The breath is always the most important thing. The foot is your priority. It's not how straight your knee is. So I feel a little bit there that I was kind of hyperextending my knee and not focusing on getting a burn in my foot. And now I'm getting a burn through the front of my shin. I'm squeezing my quad and keeping my knee slightly straight, and my right leg is bouncing around, wobbling all over the place, which is exactly what I want it to do. Keep breathing. Your hands are soft. They're not doing that much work. They're just helping you to kind of guide and support your leg. 3, 2, and 1. Next exercise, penultimate exercise. We are going to do static extension position on elbows. If you struggle being in this type of all fours position, if you have knee pain or whatever it might be, I don't want you doing it. I don't want you padding your knees. I would rather you come back on the floor and you can just put your hands behind your head and practice that opening of your arms like so. So just keep practicing opening up the chest like this. Someone's written something on the screen, but I'm not going to come and read it. Sorry, just because I don't like to interrupt the class, but I'll have a look at the end. So what we're going to do is we're going to do golfer's grip whilst we go into our static extension position. So we're not doing a fist. We're not having kind of weak, droopy little hands. We're keeping our thumbs really extended up towards the ceiling, creating as much of a 90-degree angle at our thumbs as possible. Our hands look like this. So we're not closing the knuckles like that. We're open until our second knuckles. And this is just going to help us work on our hand function. We're going to come to a kneeling position. Toes, ankles, knees, and hips in alignment. I don't want to see ankles up, off high off the floor like this. I want you really trying to push the tops of your feet down towards the floor. That might give you cramp in your feet, and if so, that's fantastic. That means you're going to move better through your pelvis in the next part of the movement. Keep the tops of the feet down. I'm keeping my hips above my knees. I'm not shifting them backwards or forwards. I'm going to take my elbows down. The elbows are slightly in front of the shoulders, and they are at shoulder width apart, which is much narrower than most people think. Keeping the tops of the feet down. I'm rolling my pelvis forwards here into extension. So it's the same movement that we've practiced in that flexion abdominals position. It's the opposite of flexion or posterior like this. Rolling that pelvis down. And without shifting your torso forwards or backwards, you're going to take your chest down towards the floor, relaxing your head. So taking your chest down towards the floor does not mean shunting your shoulders in front of your elbows, which some of you are going to want to do, and neither does it mean moving your shoulders behind where you've been before. The shoulders are slightly further behind these bent elbows. You are moving down that chest towards the floor. Your shoulder blades should start collapsing together. You're going to use the kind of force of the ground against your forearms to pull your shoulder blades back and down behind you more. So you can use your arms to help you change your shoulder position here. We're going to do 1.5 minutes. Relax your head completely. Breathe in and out of your nose. Keep pointing those toes to try and keep your feet towards the ground. Roll your pelvis forwards. So you're really trying to recreate that same motion that we did at the wall when we did flexion abdominals position. Some people will get hip cramp here when they're moving their pelvis really well. But at the same time, we're also getting rid of any thoracic rotation. We're extending our spine. We're repositioning our shoulders. The better position our upper body is in, the more we will be balanced at our pelvis and our hips, and that's going to help us with our deep squat. Every single part of your body is important for every single movement that you ever do, but it's really important when it comes to a deep squat. Keep trying to get the shoulders away from the ears, but moving the shoulders away from the ears does not mean shunting your torso backwards. You're very much in this kind of back bend position through your spine. Your arms should be on fire. Your shoulders should be on fire. Your neck should be relaxed. Your lower back should not be hurting. If your lower back is hurting, you've probably gone too far forwards to avoid the shoulder work and to compensate with your lower back because your body finds that easier. Shoulders. Play around with your torso positioning. You can move forwards and backwards slightly and see if you can find the bit that feels the most challenging, but in a kind of like productive, hard way. And of course, as ever, you need to keep breathing. Keep breathing. 2 and 1, and relax off there. So this is where we're going to finish with a whole body dorsiflexion exercise. So if you've got gravity drop set up, if you've got a step that works, then hold fire for a second because I'll instruct you through that. If you don't have a wooden slant board or a step, all I want you to do is stand with your feet parallel. So hopefully you're learning more about parallel. We're not having the toes turned out to the side. Have the toes more pigeon-toed than you think. You're just going to stand with your body back against a wall. Your feet are still in dorsiflexion here, provided that the toes are not wider than the ankles. And I don't want you lifting your rib cage up. So you're not trying to get your shoulders and your arms against the wall, because if you do that, you're most likely to lift up your rib cage and that will stop your hips from extending. You're going to draw your rib cage down and that's going to allow your hips and your legs to change. So that's option 1. Option 2 is that you can do this on your wooden slant board. I won't describe that because if you've got a wooden slant board, you probably know what you're doing. And then for everybody else, we are going to do a couple of minutes of gravity drop, which is a great position. And I don't do it often enough, actually. So we're going to come and stand on a step. And I've got my banister to my left and I've got my kind of windowsill to the right. Your hands here are supporting you, but you're really trying not to kind of grip too much with your upper body. What we are going to do is put our feet in that parallel position. So our toes and the balls of our feet are on the step, and our ankles are hanging off the step. And when you do that, you might notice that you want to bring your ankles in and swing your toes wide. So your feet are trying to cheat and give you that external rotation again. And what I want you to do is to kind of actively kick your ankles out wider than they want to be. So we're trying to encourage dorsiflexion. You're trying to keep your knees above your hips, your pelvis above your knees, and your shoulders and your head above your pelvis. So you're not taking that pelvis too far forwards in front of the toes, nor are you kind of taking your pelvis so far backwards that you're gripping with your upper body. We want all of those joints in alignment with each other as much as they possibly can. If you look down and can see most of your legs, like from the front or sort of from the top down view, if you can see your knees and your thighs too much, you're probably too far back in your pelvis. When you're in position, when you look down, you won't really be able to see your kneecaps. You'll be able to see your toes, but you won't be able to see your kneecaps. We are going to stay here for 2 minutes. So obviously when you watch this back, you won't have to listen to my incessant chatter quite so much. So you'll be able to get into it a little bit earlier. Keep breathing in and out of your nose, relax the belly, get that diaphragm, get that rib cage moving with your breath. I don't want your rib cage lifting up to the ceiling. So if you're tight through your calves and if your hips can't extend, you might be thrusting your rib cage upwards. Just like I said to the others who are at the wall, I want your rib cage downwards. I want you to really send your intention into the bottoms of your ankles here. So you're really trying to take those ankles towards the ground without the toes spinning wide. It will and hopefully should feel like a calf stretch. It might feel like you can feel your hips stretching a bit as well, but this is a great exercise for bringing things down like a hip hike. It's a great exercise for realigning the whole body. It's a great exercise for ankle dorsiflexion, pelvic balance, opening up the upper body. It's a great one to do. And if you've got a step like this at home, it's really quite easy to do. I prefer people not wearing shoes when they do this, but if you're struggling with grip, maybe next time you can wear some trainers or something like that. But ideally, I'd like you not to. But I'm a bit spoiled because I've got anti-slip stair paint on, so I understand if that's a bit hard. 30 seconds left. Keep breathing. You're trying to keep an even amount of weight through both of your feet. So you might notice that you've got kind of more of a stretch through that left-hand side. Maybe your left-hand side is tighter, but maybe you're also loading your left-hand side more. So make sure that you are indeed putting both of your hips kind of evenly over both of your feet. And we've got 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And that is the end of your hard work. But we are going to do our squat test again. So let's see if we feel any more comfortable having done those exercises that we've just done that have worked on a variety of different things. So maybe you're doing it in the chair, maybe you're doing it standing up, whichever version you're doing, we want those feet parallel with the hips, not turned out like this. Keep them parallel and just see how your body feels as you come down. So this time I feel much more comfortable. My toes feel like they don't want to lift up so much. I've got more hip strength. I'm definitely still wanting to use my upper body as a counterbalance, but I do feel quite a lot stronger in that this time round than I did at the beginning of the class. So something has changed, and it will continue to change the more that I do these classes with you. So I will be following the program just like you guys, and hopefully making myself feel better. Oh, and Lena's response was, oh, all of the wobbles earlier on when I said I couldn't read the comment. So just before we all disband, there's 25 of you today. Hello, everybody. Just before we disband, I want to remind you of 2 things. Number 1, on Wednesday, the 21st of August, so I believe that's been next Wednesday, Ben's doing his next functional fitness class at 7 a.m. British time. Obviously, it will be recorded and things if you can't make it live, but just to remind you about that, you'll get the Zoom details for that class in today's email and next week's email. And then the second thing is, I know some of you have been using it already, but the software that we use for the Posture Squad has rebranded from Searchy to Membership.io, which is not relevant to you guys, but if I ever use those terms, I forget you don't know what I mean. But basically, Searchy have now integrated this new community feature. So I am looking to filter out the use of the Facebook group, because who likes Facebook? Lots of people don't have Facebook. No one needs any more stupid memes that Facebook wants to feed them. And secondly, Facebook's not that great for me because things get lost and I can't see things. And it just means it's another thing that we have to work with. So when you go to the homepage of the software, when you visit www.theposturesquad.com, you will see that there is a section 4 called Community, and that's our new forum basically, where you can do exactly the same stuff that you were doing before in the Facebook group, but it's just more contained, and hopefully comes as good news to everybody. I will not delete the Facebook group, and I will keep checking the Facebook group just to kind of remind everybody to shepherd themselves over to the new community feature. But I'm hoping that it's going to make a lot more sense and just be a lot more straightforward for everybody. And they've got some other good things that they're rolling out as well. So they've announced that I'll be able to make an app. I've chased them again about the favorite playlist thing, but that still hasn't got anywhere. But they seem to be changing their features to make everything a bit more membership friendly. So hopefully there'll be some good things over the next few months as well. Thank you very much for joining me, everybody. I'll see you again next week. I can see all your lovely faces on the screen now. Keep up your practicing, keep squatting, and I'm going to see the coaching tier members in a few minutes' time as well. And I hope you enjoyed. And hopefully I was back on form, because I felt like I made absolutely no sense last week. I couldn't rewatch my video because I was too embarrassed. So sorry about that. It won't happen again. Lots of love, everybody. I'll see you soon. Bye.